Croeso I fideo Refugee Tales Cymru. Welcome to the Refugee Tales Cymru video. Mae hwn yn fideo dwyieithog. This is a bilingual video. Fel y gwyddwch efallai, mae Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig yn ein enwau ni yn cloi pobl mewn canolfannau symud mudwyr o dan gyfraith mewn fudo. Nid oes cyfyngiad ar ba mor hir y gall pobl cael eu carcharu. Nid oes unrhyw oruchwyliaeth farnwrol cyn eu croi dan glo, ac ni wneud cofnodion o benderfyniadau o'r fath. Mae mudwyr sy'n cael eu rhoi dan glo yn anhysbys ac anweledig. As you may know, the UK government, in our names, locks people up in removal centres under immigration law. There's no limit to how long people may be incarcerated. There's no judicial oversight of the decision to detain, and records aren't made of such decisions. Detainees are rendered both unheard and invisible. Hyd yn hyn, nid oes canolfan symud mudwyr swyddogol yng Nghymru, nad oedd yr amodau yn hen wersyll y fyddin yn Mhenali fawr gwahanol. Rydyn ni'n credu bod carcharu mudwyr, ac yn enwedig eu carcharu am dymor di-bendraw, yn anynol, ac fod rhaid I hyn ddod I ben. So far, there is no official immigration removal centre in Wales, although conditions at the former army camp in Penally were little different. We think immigration detention in general, and especially indefinite detention, is inhumane and must end, and we want to join people around Wales, the rest of the UK and worldwide to bring about this change. Mae ein grŵp, Refugee Tales Cymru, wedi ysbrydoli gan Refugee Tales, prosiect sy'n deillio o waith y Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group, mudiad sy'n ymweld â chefnogi mudwyr sydd o dan glo mewn canolfannau symud. Nod y fideo yma yw gosod cyd-destun i'r alwad I ddod ar arfer o garcharu mudwyr am gyfnod di-bendraw I ben, ac fe fyddwn nhw'n rhannu ychydig o waith Refugee Tales gyda chi, ynghyd â awgrymu sydd I weithredu eich hun os ydych chitha eisiau gweld yr ymarfer yma yn dod I ben. Our group, Refugee Tales Cymru, is inspired by Refugee Tales, an outreach project of Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group, whose members visit and support people in immigration detention. This video aims to set some context for our call to bring indefinite detention to an end, and we'll be sharing some of the work done by Refugee Tales with you, as well as suggesting how you can also raise your voice. Yn gyntaf, fideo sydyn am sut mae mudwyr yn cael eu carcharu yn y Deyrnas Unedig gan Dr Lucy Williams. But first, a short video giving an account of how people are detained in the United Kingdom by Dr Lucy Williams.
Hello, dear Refugee Tales friends. Here's a short film responding to one of the Refugee Tales walking inquiry questions. How are people detained in the UK? So I've been thinking, just how does the UK detain over 20,000 people a year and about 1,000 at any one time? These are people who are students, refugees, workers, children, victims of trafficking and violence, who may have been living in the UK for many years. They're us, just without the paperwork. But let's start with the buildings. There are 7 large immigration removal centres in the UK, better called detention centres in my opinion, 6 in England and 1 in Scotland. They are effectively prisons. They look like prisons and they operate like prisons. As well as the detention centres where people can be held indefinitely, there are also short-term holding centres. There's one of these in Northern Ireland, one in Manchester and others in ports and airports. And last year, around 400 people on any one day were detained under immigration rules in actual prisons. Stuck in a detention centre, detainees are isolated and physically separated from help and from friends. There'll be no access to the internet and sometimes not even to phones. How can anyone work on their case and keep in touch with their loved ones? There is a right to legal aid, but being isolated in a detention centre under threat of removal makes it hard to talk to a solicitor, let alone persuade them to take on your case. If your case does get to court, you won't. You'll be looking at the screen in the detention centre without even a lawyer or interpreter by your side. Nevertheless, the government's own figures show that last year, up to September 2020, 69% of immigration detainees were given bail and released from detention. But released to what? Many are released to destitution with no cost to public funding, while others are released to Home Office funded accommodation and to a cashless payment of £35.39 per week. In effect, they will be detained in the community and will have to agree to conditions such as wearing an ankle tag. Almost everyone released from detention will have to attend reporting centres. These are key parts of the detention system. Their role is to monitor former detainees and bring people back into the detention centres. Anyone on immigration bail knows that each time they sign at a reporting centre, they might end up in the holding areas of the reporting centre and return straight back to detention. All but one of the detention centres, all the short-term holding centres, all the reporting centres and the asylum accommodation is managed for profit by private companies. International companies such as Serco, MITI, Geo, Clearspring and G4S all have contracts with the UK Border Agency. These companies are the glue that holds the system together. Private companies also provide escort services, moving people in locked vans between detention centres. This can happen at any time, day or night. Convicted prisoners can't be moved at dead of night, but people in immigration detention can. It will also be private companies who arrange deportation flights. Victims of this system will be transported, shackled, to scheduled or privately chartered planes. So to sum up, how are people detained? The system works by isolating people in prison-like detention centres, monitoring and controlling people by refusing them the means to work and live in the community, processing people for the benefit of profit-making companies.
Yn 2017, darlledodd rhaglen Panorama y BBEC lyniau cudd o gam-drin difrifol carcharorion gan staff G4S yn Brook House, maes awyr Gatwick. Mae ymchwiliad cyhoeddus ar y gweill, ond mae ei gylch gwaith wedi gyfyngu i ddarganfod effeithiau a gwneud argymhellion. Penderfynodd y prosiect Refugee Tales redeg ei ymchwiliad ei hun, gan edrych ar ystod lawer ehangach o faterion yn ymwneud â chadw pobl dan glo. Bob mis, ers mis Hydref y llynedd, mae pobl wedi bod yn cerdded, siarad a chynnal cyfarfodydd ar-lein i archwilio natur ac effaith cadw pobl dan glo am gyfnod di-bendraw. Datgelir eu canfyddiadau mewn ystod o fformatau a chyfryngau i gyd fynd â lansiad adroddiad yr ymchwiliad cyhoeddus yn hwyrach eleni. Nid yw'n rhy hwyr i ymuno. Os cerddwch yn bersonol gyda ni efori, mae gynnam gardiau post i ysgrifennu eich meddyliau arnynt, a byddwn yn ei anfon ymlaen. Neu, gallwch chi postio eich hun ar wefan Refugee Tales, lle cewch fanylion am yr holl wybodaeth a thrafodaethau a gasglwyd dros y 9 mis diwethaf. In 2017, the BBC's Panorama aired undercover footage of serious mistreatment of detainees by G4S staff in Brook House, Gatwick Airport. A public inquiry is underway, but its remit is limited to ascertaining the facts and making recommendations. The Refugee Tales project decided to run its own inquiry, looking at a much wider range of issues to do with detention. Every month since last October, people have been walking, talking, and holding online meetings to examine the nature and impact of indefinite detention. Their findings will be revealed in a range of formats and media to coincide with the launch of the report of the public inquiry later this year. It's not too late to join in. If you walk in person with us tomorrow, we have postcards to write your thoughts on, and we will forward them. Or you can post them on the Refugee Tales website, where you'll find details of all the information and discussions gathered over the last 9 months. Recordiwyd ein fideo nesaf ar gyfer yr ymchwiliad ar droed, ac mae'n sôn am profiadau poenus pobl sy'n cael eu cadw dan glo. Mewn gwirionedd, mae cadw pobl dan glo yn ail-dromateiddio pobl sydd eisoes wedi profi trauma. Dylwn eich rybuddio a gallech ffeindio'r cynnwys yn anodd. Our next short video was recorded for the walking inquiry and tells of the painful experiences of detained people. In truth, detention re-traumatizes already traumatized people. We should warn you that you may find the content upsetting.
Detention center is like a prison. Keeping someone in detention make situation worse, difficult. Even though some people try to harm themselves because they don't know when they will get released from detention.
Detention center is basically is just place for punishment for the asylum seekers. It's a room and it's a toilet inside, and even the bed is made from the concrete, and your toilet inside and your bed is also from the concrete, and even you're not allowed to take your shoes inside, and the floor is very very cold also, and you have the room is basically doesn't have any window, and also have light on the top. Light is just like 24-hour. It's just like top of your head, and you don't have switch to turn off, and also have like a big camera, and and on the door is just have like tiny window on the door, and someone come and just open like this and see you, and then again shut back. Absolutely, it was crazy.
I spent 8 months in Brook House. It was such a horrible experience. It messed me up mentally, physically, emotionally. You just, because you don't know what's happening day in and day out. You're just there and aimlessly, basically. 8 months is a long time. I always contemplate suicide because I feel less of a human being. You just feel like, what's the difference between me and other human beings? Why am I in this situation? And I wouldn't wish it even on my worst enemy.
I'll just talk briefly on my first night at Brook House. I started relapsing and I'm falling sick because of the wrong food I was eating. They just treat us like animals, as if we're not human. It's a serious experience. There's window, but there's no fresh air coming in because it's sealed. So we got fresh air from the hose up the ceiling. Everything there is not good. In the sink where we got water from to drink, People spat in that sink and they do all kinds of mess in that sink. People who are unwell, mentally unwell. There are things there is just scary. People can die there because of they're not taken care of. It is barbaric to treat human being like an animal.
For 8 years, I visited Brook House Detention Centre regularly. Each week, I'd spend an hour or so with one of the 400 men detained there. I had little to offer, but I had time and a listening ear. I did lots of listening, and I heard a lot of stories from people of many different backgrounds and circumstances. Sometimes on an initial visit, I'd be told about the first day of detention. Men would have been brought from a port, a prison, a police station, and others from their own beds at dawn. Some understood why they were being detained, and others had absolutely no idea. Time and again, I heard about their bewilderment and disorientation on arrival. But at that point, many were expectant and hopeful. They would be bound to have a just hearing in England.
Talking about my experience at Immigration Detention Center, I've been many times. From my experience, I suffer from anxiety, depression. You lost yourself. You don't even know yourself anymore. You're scared, afraid. You have to fight to be released. Sometimes there's no reason why you were detained. Some of the staff there, they operate like a gangster in uniform. I feel angry talking about my experience. I feel depressed. I don't like to talk about it. I feel ashamed.
I think visiting somebody for the first time in detention, particularly a friend or a family member, can be really overwhelming because there's so many processes you have to go through, so much documentation you have to provide, so many doors to walk through, so many security checks, that it's quite a lot for somebody to take in. As a visitor, I found so many times when I've visited somebody for the first time, they say, "Nice to meet you, but I probably won't see you again. I'll be out in a couple of days. I shouldn't really be in here, it's a mistake." But then I will see them the week after, and often lots of weeks after that. So it's really hard to see that people don't think they're going to be in there for very long and then end up being there for ages.
That's what I'm going to say. Detention is a very bad place because in prison, you do get a release date and you know when you're coming out. But detention, you don't know when you're coming out. But when I was in detention, I had bad things going on in my head. I do self-harm because I don't know when I'm coming out.
One of the biggest things about the UK immigration detention system is that so few of the general public know about the situation. If you've ever been to Gatwick Airport and perhaps taken a plane when you're going on holiday from Gatwick Airport, you've probably seen the detention centres without even realising it. I visited several different people in detention, and their stories of how they came to be in detention are all unique and individual, just like the people that we visit. There's not just one way and one route into detention. There's many different routes.
Experience on, going into detention was very horrible and horrifying. So, as soon as I stepped into the place, I just felt so inhumane, getting searched, my properties getting taken away from me and stuff. I just felt so degraded and not human. Like it's a feeling that I can't even describe in words, to be honest.
Well, even though I've been visiting for a long time, I still find it intimidating. One of the things that's perhaps most distressing is when you go in is that you only go in as yourself. You can't take anything in. You can't take a book in, you can't take a game, you can't take something to discuss. When you go in, you can only carry what you've got in your head.
Well, a detention centre is a prison, basically, because when I've been working, I have visited 5 different prisons in the south of England. Category A, Category B, women's, open prisons, and then Tinsley House and Brook House. And to my mind, there is no difference between the immigration removal centres and a prison. They look like a prison, they feel like a prison, and so to my mind they are a prison, except that the people who are in there are not prisoners, they're detainees. And that is, to me, a fundamental problem with detention. And I know many people who are detained are very concerned and unhappy about the fact that somebody is making money out of their detention.
I was taken to about 4 different detention centers. 4. For the part of the building, again, Brook House is for me not commendable. It's not a place I will ever forget. Conditions. It's a difficult situation. It will always lingers on your mind. It always lingers on your mind. Especially something that has never happened to you. Never in your life. This is the first experience. So it's not something you will forget soon. You know what I mean? So it affects your mental, your physical, your psychological, your emotional. Every aspect of life is affecting you. There's no joke about it. Phew. You don't even know what your fate is. Whether you'll stay there for 6 months, especially if you've heard from few other people that have been there 8 months, 6 months, 2 years. So I just forgot about all of those. I tried not to think about all of those scenarios and don't continue praying. But to talk about detention, about the way I was arrested and the treatment I got up to this day, it's only God. I don't even want to say it. It's only God will see me through all of this difficult time.
أنا سويت في السجن. أنا بروك هاوس. أنا سويت أسبوعين. في أسبوعين في أشياء عجبوني كثير وفي أشياء ما عجبوني. شغل اللي عجبني كثير ده الفطور فجر الصباح. في مدينة بنفط الفوق ده شغل عجبني كثير. وتاني شيء اللي عجبني كثير ده التدريس. أنا الإنجليز ده كله عجبني كثير. متعلمين ده وقت حلو مشينا وقت حلو زينا ده عجبني كتير. والله شغل ما عجبني ده هو سجن ده انت قاعد داخل ما بتتحرك ده بس ما حلو ما عندك حرية ما تقدر تمشي طرق ذاتك بقراءة كتير. وبالليل ده كان تم الساعة 10 ده كلنا ندخل داخل وبقفلونا. ده شغل في السجن ده ما عجبني كتير.
Ers 2016, mae prosiect Refugee Tales wedi paru awduron proffesiynol gyda mudwyr sydd wedi profi cael eu rhoi dan glo. Ers cychwyn, mae 2 cyfrol o'r straeon personol yma wedi eu cyhoeddi, ac mae 28 o'r straeon yma wedi eu cynhyrchu fel fideos, sydd ar gael ar wefan 28 Tales for 28 Days. Mae ein fideo olaf yn un ohonyn nhw. Stori'r myfyriwr. Since 2016, the Refugee Tales project has paired professional writers with individuals who have first-hand experience of immigration detention so that their stories can be recorded. Since the project began, 3 volumes of refugee stories have been published, and 28 of them have been recorded as videos and are available to watch on the 28 Tales for 28 Days website. Our last video is one of them, The Student's Tale.
The Student's Tale, as told to Helen MacDonald. There's a window and the rattle of a taxi and grapes on the table, black ones, sweet ones. And the taxi is also black. And there's a woman inside it, a charity volunteer who befriended you when you were in detention. And she's leaning to pay the driver. And through the dust and bloom of the glass, I see you standing on the pavement next to the open taxi door, and your back is turned towards me, so all I can see are your shoulders, hunched, in a blue denim jacket. They're set in a line that speaks of concern, not for yourself, but for the woman who's paying the fare. I wave through the window and you turn and see me and smile, hello. This is a borrowed house we're talking in. It's not my home. I don't know anything about you. It is hard to ask questions. You want me to ask questions because you say it's easier to answer questions than to tell your story. I don't want to ask you questions because I think of all the questions you must have been asked before. But you want me to ask questions, and so I begin with, when did you get here? And you write in careful Persian numerals, 12, 2016, December. And I ask more questions, and you answer them, and when the English words won't come, you translate using your phone. And this takes some time. And the sun slaps its flat gold light upon the table and the bowl of grapes and the teapot, all these quiet domestic things, as I wait to know what you might mean. Here are the words you look up while we talk. Apostate, bigoted, depraved, hide. You are a student of epidemiology. Epidemiologists study the mode of transmission of disease, the way it runs through populations from person to person. You tell me that back in your country, you used to meet with your friends in your restaurant at night so you could talk of Christianity and read the Bible. There were Christian signs in your restaurant. You knew that you might be arrested for doing this. Secrecy is paramount, but faith is also faith. This is what happens when you are denounced as an apostate. The authorities speak of you as if you are one of the agents of disease that you have studied. At prayers one Friday, they denounce you by name in 5 regions, 2 cities, and 3 villages. They said a woman at your university had depraved you, by which they meant she had encouraged you to become a Christian. They said that you had changed your religion, and that now you possess this faith, you spread it to other men. They see your belief as a contagious disease. They want to isolate it, contain it, and like all such malevolent metaphors that equate morality with health, the cure is always extinguishment. You know what happens to apostates, to those who have changed their religion in your country. Even I know what happens. I'm holding my breath just thinking of it. When the intelligence services came looking for you at your grandmother's home, she called you and told you that these men were your friends, even though they spoke the wrong language for the region and they were wearing distinctive clothes that made it obvious, really, who they were and why they were there. But she was old, and you couldn't blame her for expecting friendship when what was offered was its scorched obverse. Your uncle knew better. He told you to flee. Your life is in danger, he said. Truth. So you fled. You left everything. You drove from city to city, and in a city more distant, met 2 friends of your uncle. They told you they could take you to Turkey with others by car. And once you were there, you wondered where you should go. Your uncle said the UK is good, and he offered to pay the smuggling agents to get you here. The car unloaded you all in an unkept garden, and you all had to hide there until the middle of the night when the truck came and you got in. Days in the darkness inside a lorry on its way north, a freezer truck. How many people were in there with you? I ask. And you laugh and say, 10, I don't know, it was dark. And I laugh too, a little ashamed, and wonder why I want to press you for these little details. None of us want to know what this is like. We don't want to know how it feels not to eat or drink or sleep for 5 days and nights, to be sustained in terror and darkness merely through the hope that there is light on the other side. None of us want to know what it feels like to be threatened with a knife, as you were threatened, to be held at gunpoint by people you had paid to bring you to safety. You say, it was the worst feeling. Then you say it again, the worst feeling. Several times you tell me, I see my death. Then you say it again, I see my death. The hardest things, I realize, you are saying them all twice. And what I am thinking, as you say sorry into the silence, while you wait to be able to once again speak, is this. I think of how scientists have only just found out how our brains make memories. They used to think that we record a short-term memory, then archive it later, move it to a different part of the brain to store it long-term. But now they've discovered that the brain always records 2 tracks at once, that it is always taping 2 stories in parallel. Short-term memories, long-term memories, 2 tracks of running recollection, memory doubled, always doubled, which makes everything that ever happens to us happen twice, which makes us always beings split in 2. You are an epidemiologist. You are a refugee. You are also an asylum seeker who has seen detention centre inmates cut themselves with razors, lash out in violence, numb themselves with spice. The government wants to send you back to Greece, but that would be dangerous because of people there who know who you are, who have threatened you, who have contacts with the authorities back home. So now you are in a hostel with 400 others. You have to sign in once in the morning and once again at night. You are a student, a brother, a son, who manages to speak to your family back home through Telegram, through WhatsApp. And you're also a man who asks the receptionist for help when violence or sickness breaks out in the hostel and watches the receptionist shrug dismissively and no help comes. All the things you see between refugees, you tell me, are harmful for brain, for mind, for spirit. You say of the hostel in the quietest, gentlest voice that there, nothing is good, really. Nothing is good. It's a very nasty place. You tell me twice that some people have not even any clothes. In December, you'd call the police from the frozen dark inside the lorry. The police opened the doors and took you to a cell, questioned you, detained you for 72 hours. And when you requested asylum, they moved you to an immigration detention centre. You were there for 80 days. I have heard a lot about the conditions there, this place that is known as a hellhole. So it is a mark of your kindly reticence that all you can say about it is, the situation in detention was very bad. You are a refugee who has taken deep breaths to sing songs in this detention centre, where people are held indefinitely, and you are also a man sitting at a sunny dining table, laughing out loud at your mistake when you realise that you said your father was literature, when what you meant to say was your father is illiterate. You are a man who can laugh at the ridiculousness of mistranslation, and you are also a man who has left a life behind you, your father, your little brother, your ailing family members, in every corner of home. And that loss pours from you, silent through the laughter, like a cold current of air that sinks to the floor and fills the room beneath, everything light that is spoken here. You don't want to talk about yourself except to give the facts. What you want to talk about are the problems facing the people around you. Your charity volunteer friend tells me that after you saw an advert for water aid, you asked her to donate what little funds you had to the children who were suffering, because the way the system works, you weren't allowed to do it yourself. She tells me, though she apologised for speaking because it is not her story, that you have been buying fruit and lentils for the children in the hostel because the food is so bad it makes people sick, and you can see the children are malnourished. You are a man whose eyes are bright with unspilled tears when you tell me of the horror of your journey here. But when you think of the people who have shown you kindness, that is when you break down and cry. You say of the woman sitting with us, I would maybe have suicide without her. When I ask you if the people in the city where you live are good to you, you say yes, because if you ask them an address, they will tell you where it is. I think about all the stories we tell of refugees, and how they're always one story or another, never both at once. Tragic stories or threatening stories, victims or aggressors, never complicated, always simple, always with clean edges. Easy pigeonholes to fit people who have been forced to take wing. But a hole is not just a pigeonhole. It's the space between two things. It's a hole that's the gap between a word in Urami or in Farsi and a word in English. It's the space between past and future, between old lives and new, between years. When the new year came in March, you went to the park in the city where the hostel is, and you sang songs welcoming the new year by the water of the lake. What can a new year mean when you are young and all you're able to do is wait? I want to be useful, you say. I don't want to spend my time in the hostel waiting. And then you rub your eyes with one hand and you say, please pray for me. You say, this issue is very distracted my brain, my mind. I want to quickly take a part of this society and the culture. At the moment, I haven't any certificate because I'm an asylum seeker. And I don't take a part in helping people because I don't have any money. I don't have any device for helping the people. And I think my living is very precious. Precious. You try the word out as a question, as if the word is itself somehow wrong. I don't like be spend it by the time waiting, you say, because I'm young. You are young. You are a student, an epidemiologist, a Christian, a refugee. You want to help people so much, it hurts my heart. You are a man who I drive after we have talked that afternoon to the hospital so we can take a photograph of you standing outside the School of Clinical Medicine, because bound up in a sense of your future is this brightness that you might one day be able to help, to work in medicine here. And you are also a man who tips back his head and laughs when we discover that the school has been closed for rebuilding and the windows are boarded up and the palings mean we can't see the building at all. We take pictures anyway. Us in front of the barriers, you alone, you with your companion, you with me. We are all of us waiting while the world is rebuilt.
Ond beth gallech chi wneud? What can you do? Gallwch ddweud wrth bobl. Yn rhyfeddol, mae'n ymddangos mai chydig iawn o bobl sy'n ymwybodol ein bod yn cadw pobl dan glo am gyfnod di-bendraw, na chwaith yn ymwybodol o'r amodau mae pobl yn cael eu cadw ynddynt. Felly dywedwch wrth eich teulu, ffrindiau a'ch grwpiau cymdeithasol. Helpwch i godi'r alwad i ddod ar amodau hyn i ben drwy drafod mewn person neu rhannu'ch safbwynt ar y cyfryngau cymdeithasol. You can simply tell people. Remarkably few people seem to know that we detain people indefinitely, or the conditions in which people are detained. So please tell your family, friends and groups you belong to, and spread the word in person and on social media. Help make the call for an end to indefinite detention deafening. Fe allech chi ysgrifennu at eich aelod seneddol yn gofyn iddyn nhw ymrwymo i gefnogi eich hafswm cyfnod clo o 28 diwrnod, neu, os ydyn nhw eisoes wedi gwneud, i ddiolch iddyn nhw. Gofynnwch am apwyntiad i drafod y pwnc, ac fe allwch gyflwyno gopi o un o lyfrau Refugee Tales. You could write to your MP, asking them to support a limit of 28 days, or, if they already do, to thank them. Get an appointment, and maybe present a copy of one of the Refugee Tales books. Gyflwynodd Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig ei chynllun newydd ar gyfer mewnfudo yn gynharach eleni, ac mae'n cynnig deddfau llymach nag sydd gennym ni nawr. Darganfyddwch fwy amdano, a gadewch i'ch aelod seneddol wybod beth yw eich barn. Mae mwy o wybodaeth ar ein tudalen Facebook, ac fe welwch lythyr enghreifftiol ar wefan grŵp lles Gatwick Detainees. The government brought out its new plan for immigration earlier this year, and it proposes even harsher laws than we have now. Find out more about it, and let your MP know what you think. There's more information on our Facebook page, and you'll find a sample letter on Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group website. Gallech ddysgu mwy am gadw dan glo am gyfnod di-bendraw drwy wefannau megis Refugee Tales, Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group, a rhai llawer o sefydliadau eraill sy'n gweithio i geisio cefnogi ceiswyr lloches a ffoaduriaid. You can learn more about indefinite detention on the Refugee Tales and Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group websites, and those of many other organisations working in support of asylum seekers and refugees. Cyfrannwch os gallwch chi i grwpiau sy'n cefnogi ceiswyr lloches a ffoaduriaid. Donate if you can to groups supporting asylum seekers and refugees. Diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio ein fideo, a diolch hefyd i'r Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group a phrosiect Refugee Tales am yr ysbrydoliaeth a'r hawl i ddefnyddio'r fideos da chi wedi weld heno. Thank you for watching our video, and many thanks as well to the Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group and the Refugee Tales project for their inspiration and for permission to use the videos you've seen. Ni'n gobeithio byddwch chi'n cerdded y fory lle bynnag yr ydych chi, ac yn ymuno hefo ni ar y Zoom i drafod ac i glywed mwy o straeon a cherddoriaeth. Welwn i chi yno. We hope you'll be walking tomorrow wherever you are and joining us on Sunday for a Zoom gathering with more tales and music. See you there.